Hello, and welcome to the podcast Self Care with Dr. Di. Today's episode features a special guest, Amber Ball, the field director for the MSW program with ETSU. Amber has some great things to share with our listeners today. Welcome, Amber, and thank you so much for being here. Can you introduce yourself and please share a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me today. As Dr. Dye stated, my name is Amber Ball. I am the field director here at East Tennessee State University for our master's program. I started that role in February of 2024. Prior to that, the bulk of my social work experience was within child welfare. So I worked in child welfare for 20 years. So I worked in child welfare from April of 2003 till April of 2023. So that has been the bulk of my social work experience in a variety of different roles and programs within that. After leaving that, I did some work with hospice. I wanted to try a different population. So I did that for about 9 months before coming here as the field director.
Wow, so you were in child welfare for almost 20 years.
I think I grew up as a social worker in child welfare, really.
You
That's where I
did.
spent my growing up years is definitely as a child welfare, worker, and then moving into various levels of supervision and different programs within it. So primarily foster care, that's really where my heart was. So that's where I spent the bulk of my time was spent with in foster care in various roles.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. So, tell our listeners, how did you first learn about the importance of self-care?
To be honest, I think I learned about it later than I should have as a social worker. We're by nature helping people, and so we don't like to say no. Um, I don't know that I knew about self-care, and I was very, very good at talking to my staff about their self-care, but I was not very good at following my own advice. So that was something I really had to think about. About 10 years ago, I do think I had some health scares, a lot from stress and lack of self-care. And so then started setting aside time to go to the gym. I started running, started doing some of that stuff. And I don't know if there was one incident that made me go, okay, this is it, except, it's always a realignment of your self-care. And so just being in that stress, but then hitting a certain age and a certain age as a woman, and then doctors start telling you, well, you're starting to show these signs. And, even my doctor was like, it's the stress. I think was my first foyer into, okay, I've got to do stuff for myself as well. Many of us play multiple roles, right? So social work, you need self-care, but my roles are also a wife, a mother of 3 kids, so that self-care time gets even more limited sometimes for us. But very important. I can feel it in myself when I'm starting to feel crunchy, as I call it. I feel crunchy inside when I need a minute to maybe sit in my room and listen to music or read a book or go for a walk so I think the level of self-care too also depends on, what the situation is and what you need at that time.
One of the biggest things with self-care is we talk about it a lot, but we have to practice it. And
Mhm.
we're good at telling other people about self-care, but it's almost like, we're not practicing what we preach.
Like just this weekend, I was reflecting on some stress in my life and like, okay, I work and I adjunct 2 classes and I'm working on my doctorate right now. And oh wait, I also do this work for a contract agency. And even now, right at 47, I'm like, okay, something's got to give, right? Because I took too much on, which is a tendency that I have. I think a tendency a lot of social work and people in helping professions have is taking it on. So I, sat down this weekend and I said, okay, here's what I've got going on in my life and how do I readjust to get some of this stress off of me, right? And that decision was letting something go. And then you have to decide what do I let go? What is realistic to let go? What is feasible to let go? So for me, it was the contract work for a minute, until I can kind of get myself feeling in a better place. Um, and then also recently, another thing that was very new to me around self-care that I have started telling a lot of people is I saw an interview with Jane Fonda, and I don't even know where it was. It was just a random one I came across. But what she said was, I wish I had known as a younger person that no is a full sentence or a complete sentence. And so I have really started thinking about that. It is okay to say no and not have to give you an explanation to my no, right? It's okay. Unless you're my mom, because she's still my mom.
Absolutely. Yes, that's something we have to know our boundaries. And
Yeah,
that's a big part of self-care is knowing your boundaries and setting boundaries.
yeah.
And when you know that you only have so much time, you can't say yes to everything.
No, and I think that is one area of social workers. We feel like we can't say no because everybody needs the help, but you can't pour from that empty cup. So you just have to think of that.
Now, you are the field director for the MSW program at ETSU. So I know that in your role, you have a lot of talks with students about all kinds of challenges they face and how to balance responsibilities with well-being. Talk to our listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, the most important thing to me when I'm in those conversations in those spaces with students is each of them are an individual being, right? Yes, you're in the same cohort. Yes, you need this kind of placement or that kind, whatever section of field that you're preparing for. Um, but I kind of have a life motto of how I approach things, and I approach it this way too. So when I go into talking to students about field or any matter of subjects, right, whether it's their placement, an issue in their field, is my motto each day to focus on being the best me I can be each day, is that I approach each day with intentionality, right? What do I want to do today? How do I want to feel today? How do I want to make other people feel today? And that it precludes my family, that includes my colleagues, and most definitely includes students, right? So I want to go into every space with them with intentionality. Um, and it's very individualized for them, right? So what are your needs? Sometimes I tell them, I'm going to ask you some personal questions. It's not because I want your personal, right? I need to know what your life outside of being an MSW student looks like in order to make you successful in field. And we have a lot of conversations about um, reality, right? Something might look really good on paper. Like you may really want to do this placement and you think that this agency is just your dream agency, but that agency is an hour from your house. So now you're adding a 2-hour commute just to your field placement that doesn't count as your field hours, right? So having some of those intentionality conversations with them. Um, and so then the second thing of my day I always start with is grace. Intentionality and grace is where I go. And so, that everything I'm doing is intentional. Every interaction I have is intentional. But then every interaction I have is also filled with grace for the person and some days grace for myself, right? I set my intentions for the day and it didn't happen. And that's something I think I've learned over the time is grace for myself and others more um, than anything, and how important that is. So I think with students, it's the intentionality, it's the grace, it's knowing they've got a million things going on. Um, Self-identifying, right? We were all social work students at one point or another. I know they probably think it was a million years ago, but I do remember, when I got my master's, I worked full time. I already had 3 kids. I know what that means to have that full plate. So I think I bring that to them as well, is just that real life understanding of all the things that they're trying to balance. And we just spend a lot of dedicated time together, what makes the most sense for each student, and really going from an individual approach. And then the other thing is, I think I just try to always be there to support them because I know field is stressful. I mean, it's 16 to 20 more hours of your life every week. It's intense. They are running into things in field that they've never experienced before. If they've not been in the social work field, you're running into that exposure to trauma, your post-secondary trauma, compassion fatigue. That's when they're going to start seeing and feeling all of these things is in that field experience. So letting them know too, hey, I'm not just here to place you. I'm here for this whole process. And then talk to them about when they're developing their schedule. A lot of times I'll say, when are you going to sleep? That sounds like a real basic self-care question, but it's a real question. I'm like, that's a great proposal. When are you going to sleep? Right? You've got to sleep.
Right.
You've still got classes, you've still got papers. So I think, Dr. Dye, really, it's just that individualized approach that is the best way for me to be a field director. Because one shoe does not fit every student, one placement doesn't fit every student. And whatever we can do to set them up for success, Anybody that's met with me a lot with field also knows I will say a lot. I'm more about quality than quantity. Let's make sure you have a quality experience. I don't want you out there checking hours to check hours, right? So are you in an agency where you're employed that we can sit down and come to the table and come up with a plan for you that will help you, right? So you're not going to work basically a third job outside of school. If you do have to work, what does that, what can we do? I spend a lot of time talking to agencies about students' needs, especially around scheduling. So, there's just a lot of time that's spent with students, but also behind the scenes, trying to set up their self-care as well.
Such a powerful motto. I love how you tied intentionality and grace together, and it feels like it's a more sustainable way to navigate both work and life. And
Yes.
then all of, your experience and wisdom that you share with our students is very important because, like you said, field is a stressful experience. It's a great experience, but even
Yes.
great things can be stressful. Thank you so much for all that you do for our students at ETSU and in the MSW program to set them up for success and help them be successful. So let me ask you one last thing. Tell our listeners one final piece of advice that you would share. How can they make self-care a priority?
When I got into like, okay, I need to do better with my self-care. And everybody's personality is different, right? So everybody is going to have something that works for them. I have a tendency to be what you call very type A. I'm very organized. I like things neat and orderly, and that's my personality. So honestly, for me, I put it on my calendar, and I still do, right? Okay, I want to go to the gym 3 days this week. I'm going to look at my calendar, and these are the three, whatever that's going to look like. I want to make it to that yoga class at the gym tonight. I'm putting it on my calendar, right? So it's not just kind of a thought in the wind. Hey, you know what? I want to start getting a massage once a month with my husband. And okay, you know what? We're going to put it on the calendar. We're not going to, go, oh, we're going to do that. Best intentions, right? But, oh, yeah, we'll do that once a month. And then, oh, wait, November's gone. Right? What happened in November? Where'd it go? So for me, it is that intentionality of putting it on my calendar. And that also helps me too, right? If I look at my week and I see all green, that's what I say, because my work calendar is green with appointments. I'm like, okay, this week's going to be a rough week. Where can I find some space and time for myself, right? Or what do I need to move around? So I think that's it. For me, I know it sounds great, scheduling your self-care, and you're like, is it self-care if you schedule it? But it is, because if you don't schedule that self-care, especially students working, whatever, anybody, but I think putting that time, so also for me, because I'm working on my doctorate and all the things that we were talking about earlier. I have a rule for myself, and I say, again, I approach that with grace, right? Because it doesn't always happen, that I'm going to have everything for my doctoral program submitted by Thursday evening, because I don't want to deal with it on the weekend, right? So it's back to that intentionality, because if you're not intentional with your time, then self-care becomes harder. So I think that intentionality and scheduling for me is my best advice to people is make it something that's on your calendar as something you have to do.
Yes, and I think that's great advice because it's in the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics,
Yes.
says that we must practice self-care with intention. So thank you again, Amber, for sharing this great information with our listeners. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get updates with new podcasts. We have several special guests who will be joining us soon. I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your self-care practices and how having a regular routine can help you cope with stress and daily life challenges. Take care and be blessed.